Hi, everyone. This week on the podcast, I have a great guest, and we are going to go into motherhood, self-care, and those roller coaster emotions. Plus, she's sharing wisdom from her brand new book. You don't want to miss it. As we continue to transition seasons and discuss the importance of quality supplements, I wanted to share a special offer from my favorite supplement company, Seeking Health. You can get 10% off your entire order at Seeking Health by going to the link at my website, natalietysdal.com/favorites. It's a great opportunity to try their high-end quality products and experience the benefits for yourself. Seeking Health offers a wide range of supplements designed to support your body's natural processes. Whether you're looking to optimize your digestion, boost your energy, or improve your mental clarity, they have something for everyone. One of the things I love about Seeking Health is their commitment to quality. Their products are GMO-free, backed by a 60-day money-back guarantee, and formulated with pure, scientifically backed ingredients. My family uses them. Remember, Seeking Health supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. They're designed to support your body's natural healing processes. So if you're ready to take your health to the next level, be sure to check out natalietysdal.com/favorites. Let's embrace prevention, support our well-being, and maximize our body's healing potential. Hi, everyone. It's Natalie, and welcome back to the podcast today. I have a great guest. You're going to love her as much as I do, Mirella Acebo. And she's a mom. She's an actress. She's the author of the book SOS for the Mom, a Christian mom's guide to managing emotions. I don't know about you, but I struggle with that. Sometimes I struggle with my emotions. So we're going to talk about that emotional roller coaster of motherhood, the importance of self-care, especially spiritual self-care, and we'll talk about what that is. Also, how confessing and making amends can actually transform our relationship with our kids and our spouses. She's going to share her own story about becoming a mom while caring for her dying mother and how she found support, the support she needed. We'll talk about balancing faith with a professional life. I know that applies to a lot of you, and dealing with mom guilt. She also uses some fantastic tips that we're all going to learn from. So before we get into it today, would you do me the favor of subscribing to the podcast? Do yourself the favor as well, because then you won't miss a single episode. And I have a newsletter that I would love for you to join as well, with lots of tips and inspiration. You can get all of that at natalietysdal.com. Okay, let's not waste any time. Let's get to my episode with Mirella Acebo. Mirella, thank you for taking the time to join me. I love what I see in you and how you've developed your career as an actress now into helping moms. I mean, we have kids about the same age, and yet I was talking to you just before we got started about managing my emotions. You know, you think you cry a lot when the babies are crying and they're little, but the emotions of being a mom at every stage are so real.
Yes. That's something I often say. Our emotions are real, they're big, and sometimes they're real big. And I would even add oftentimes they're real big. I've been a mom for 22 years. I have two kids. They're now grown. They're 20 and 22, but I remember being a brand new mom, new to motherhood, and you just instantly feel this next level amount of love and tenderness, and all the emotions I feel like get magnified. The positive and the quote unquote negative, if I could dare say that. And so we go into motherhood, I think oftentimes romanticizing what it's going to be like. And not always, but I think generally speaking, we think of the beautiful parts of it, and that the harder parts are really experiential and they go deep. Our emotions are deep. And something that I always like to just encourage moms with is validate any emotion, every emotion that you experience. It's part of the human condition. Our emotions are gift. Generally speaking, this is the message that I really try to get across to moms is let's not shame ourselves. Let's not judge ourselves for maybe those negative emotions or the harder emotions that we experience. It's all part of the human condition. So the question really becomes is, how do I manage them? How do I get a hold of them so they don't control me and dominate me and then become who I am as a mother? So I think it's all part of the learning process, the growth process of being a mom and just being a woman in general.
Do you find, you just mentioned not shame yourself for your emotions? What are the most common, because you wrote a book about this, which I want to talk about, what are the most common emotions and why, as women, I certainly do. I know my emotional trigger, my cry trigger, which is funny because I did the news for 28 years and only a handful of times did I cry on TV. Maybe I just put myself in a different box, but my mom emotions, I mean, it's like the drop of anything and my cry trigger goes off. My kids are always like, Mom's crying. And it's almost like a guilt thing. Lately, I think maybe it's more God saying, I'm here with you. It's good. And your cry trigger, it means that so I tell myself, no, God's here. He's present. And that's the way we see it. Maybe that's just what I tell myself. But what are the most common, thank you. What are the most common emotions and why do we have shame for these things?
That's such a good question. The first one is, I'm going to agree with you with the guilt. I think the mom guilt is huge and it's all consuming. It could be all day long. We're feeling guilty about
There's always something.
There's always something, especially when we have the luxury to look back on yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago. We judge ourselves then, or we judge ourselves today for something that we did. You didn't do it perfectly. We're flawed. There's so many reasons. And then there's the evidence all around us in our house. Our homes aren't picked up. We've dropped the ball. We've missed things, appointments. Like there's all sorts of things, reminders all the time. And I often think, it's all about what we focus on. If our focus is constantly on the parts of us that are failing or just aren't measuring up, we're always going to feel like a failure. And I believe God doesn't want us living like that, condemning ourselves over and over again. That is not the freedom that we are guaranteed as believers, as daughters of God. Like He came for us to live life and live life to the full, not in condemnation, but in full freedom. So I think that mom guilt, sometimes it's warranted, but I would go as far as saying many of the times it's really not. I don't even think that that's the appropriate language we should use for small things that really don't, we say, I feel guilty. Well, my follow-up question is, what did you do wrong? And a lot of times it's not that mom did something wrong. It's really more lamenting a situation. It's just a part of life that things aren't going to work out perfectly as we want them to all of the time. So it could be, instead of guilt, we're feeling sad. We're feeling disappointed. We're lamenting something that isn't happening. So I think mom guilt is really a big one. Worry is a big one. I often say when we birth our children, we also birth a side of worry. I don't think that worry ever goes away. I think our worries change as our kids grow up, and in the different developmental stages, there's always a case to be made as to why we should worry. Are they walking when they're, quote unquote, supposed to? Those mile markers, are our children hitting those mile markers? And if they're not, then they're delayed, and what's happening? And then we send them off to school. There's worry about that, the influences around them, and then again, are the development being properly in a healthy way? And then you and I were talking earlier about being empty nesters and having children away. Well, there's worry about that now, right? Because we've released them into the world, into making their own choices, into their own independence. And we have less and less control. So I feel like the worry is a constant. And so is mom guilt, along with other things too. Our our anger, our tendencies to want to control, our overwhelm, all of those are really common
feelings. How do you help women first identify? I mean, that's my number one thing. It's like, you can't help yourself in your physical, mental, emotional health if you can't identify what's happening. But how do you help them, especially using biblical principles? I love what you've done in the book, in identifying other women in the Bible who've gone through this. But how are you able to help them? What tips can you give us with all of this?
Yes. Well, it always starts with really having that one-on-one conversation at heart to heart and really being a good listener, which I think just comes naturally to me. Very interested about where a person is and their experience in life. And so it just starts out with knowing the facts. What is it that's happening? What is it that's on your mind that's causing the worry, the overwhelm, the guilt, right? So talking about the facts and laying them out. And then what are the feelings underneath the facts? That's the next layer, is going a little bit deeper. And I think in just being able to ask those questions, when the person is able to articulate, is given a safe place to be able to tell their story without interruption, asking clarity questions, all that in and of itself is so healing. To have somebody listen to you and to validate you and to normalize you, it really is a gift to have just at the minimum one safe person, a friend, a spouse, a family member, to be able to just process it out loud and get it out. And again, without shame or without judgment, because that's part of the cleansing. It's part of the healing. And so I encourage moms, or one of my mantras that what I say is, let's be real with how we feel so we can heal. So the process to that. And then going back to really getting granular about what is the feeling, right? We talked a little bit more about just this broad mom guilt. Okay, so what is it about? What is that over? What is it? Is it an opportunity to practice some self-care and then repair? Because sometimes the guilt is warranted. You know, we acted out in rage, we lashed out, we were impatient with our child, and then we feel bad about it later. So I would say, okay, that's a great opportunity. It's a great growing opportunity for mom, and an opportunity to also engage our children in repairing that. Caring for herself. So I say self-care, right? Just validate. And when I say self-care, what I'm really talking about is spiritual self-care, is coming really before the Lord in a time of really confession and repentance and really making amends there. And then it's from that posture to be able to approach, our child, our spouse, whoever, and repair that in a very honest and gentle way. Like, mommy blew up earlier. I was impatient because of this happened. And so I think that really just helps the healing process. And it helps our kids see us as humans, perfect moms. I always say to moms, you children have human moms, not robot moms. We were to be robot moms without emotion. So our humanity really is just the most honest part about us. And our human experience is also an emotional experience. Our motherhood experience is very experiential. We're in it in the moment, and there's a lot of pressures and things that we feel, and we're trying new things. I say it's experimental too. Some things work for one child, other things don't work with another child, and it's emotional. So if we think about those three things are always true about any given moment. Motherhood is experiential, it's also experimental, and it's emotional. And that's all those three things are part of just the transformative journey for us. So if we look at motherhood less about condemning ourselves for not doing it right and not being perfect, and we just reframe it and look at motherhood as us growing up too, along with children, right? We focus so much on their developmental stages and their growth as they grow up. Well, every milestone that they go through, we're also growing along with them. Every developmental stage, we can look at it as, oh, I'm also developing and learning. I'm not perfect, but I keep going and I keep growing as a person and as a mom, as a woman of faith.
Yeah, so much of what you said. It's so important for us to be able to admit when we've blown up or we have a bad day, because we just look at our kids witnessing that and being able to do it themselves. I hope one day that they can look back and say, whoa, I just had a bad day and blew up at someone, and it's actually because I feel guilty over this thing, or, but modeling that self-awareness so that hopefully they'll be able to do that too. And those are the real lessons we hope to be teaching our kids, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. 100%. Because life is made up of relationships all around us, whether it's like personal relationships, intimate, in the workplace, everything is about relationships. So the more we can learn about ourselves, human nature, and the nature that other people also have, we can learn to also extend grace. That we're in different places at different times with different boiling points, different sensitivities, different temperaments. And so we all don't respond the same. And we always have a choice to be, reactive in a moment, meaning reactive and letting our emotions take the lead, or we can be responsive. And that's where really I feel faith comes in. God helps us be responsive, be dependent on the Holy Spirit to help us respond in appropriate ways, as opposed to letting our human flesh take the lead and reacting in a very explosive way.
How did you realize, in the book, by the way, is SOS for the mom, right? And the subtitle is?
Yes.
I'll let you say it.
A Christian Mom's Guide to Managing
Right. I didn't
emotions.
have it in front of me. How did you decide you were going to delve into this topic? Because I've interviewed thousands of authors. Haven't seen anything specific to this, especially the women in the Bible who have that you talk about in the book. How did you decide to do this? And then I want to get into some more tips of what you give people and how we can give someone listening right now immediate help to their emotions.
Okay, great. Well, first, thank you. I take that as a compliment that you say you haven't seen a book like this before, because I really feel like it's one of a kind, and it was a download really from the Lord. So I give him credit for that, because I look back and I go, wow, we did this together. So thank you for that. So just to back up a little bit about my story. When I first became a mom, I was going through a really hard time with my own mom, who was in her sunset years. She was dying. Her health was deteriorating pretty quickly. So I was caretaking her and also a new mom. So talk about emotions being amplified. It wasn't just new motherhood emotions. It was also grieving the loss of my mom before my very eyes. So she passed away, and I'm now a new mom with no mom. And I was overwhelmed with so much grief and guilt, and felt isolation, and like nobody understood what I was going through. And my new mom friends couldn't. They had the new mom emotions, but there was this added part that I really needed help with. And so I decided to join a support group at church, and that led to more community. That was my saving grace, is having a group of women at every age to help really validate and normalize what I was going through. And by me listening to their stories, by being with women, moms who were further along, I could gain wisdom. I gleaned from them. And then I also was surrounded by moms who were just a little bit behind where I was. And so I was realizing, oh, I can pour into them. And isn't that what community and support is all about? To be able to be encouraged and also encourage. So fast forward, as I really started processing and thinking back on early motherhood and my own emotional journey, present day, I just sort of asked my question. I asked this question to the Lord. It's like about emotions. Are there moms in the Bible that could teach us about emotions? What does the Bible say? What do you say about emotions? And so I started revisiting some of the moms, and they're all mostly in Genesis. And I started really investing in their story, the story that's attached to them. We don't know a lot about them. One of them isn't even named, like Noah's wife. We don't even know her name, but we know the stories attached to them. So I started really thinking about that, breaking that down. What would it have felt like, right, to be in an ark for a year, or be given that assignment from God, the biggest assignment of their life, that you're going to build an ark, and this is why I'm going to flood the world, and I'm picked you, family, to be in it. So also, here's a little tangent too. As I shared with you, I'm an actor. I've been an actor for 16 years. I live here in Los Angeles. And so I really feel like the acting, that training, the breaking down of a character that um, that skill that I used in acting is what I brought to this book. Essentially taking, a character, and when I say a character, I mean this real women in the Bible. But I take her story. I really imagine stepping into her story, being married, to whoever it was, and what it felt like, what she saw, what she experienced, the emotion that perhaps was driving her, right? These are all things I do with the script, whether it's with the commercial script or any kind of script. I look at the character and I break it down. And what was she feeling? And what was driving her? And what's important to her? What does she have for that day? That's how specific we get in the acting world when we're breaking down a character. So now with this book, I brought all that skills, all those skills to this book. And I did that for the 10 moms. So I talk about, for example, Jochebed, Moses' mom, who was a slave, had a baby at 3 months. She releases him into the river, right? Because the Pharaoh had decreed that all the babies had to be killed. And so she, by faith, releases him. And so just allowing myself to really step into that, what would it feel like? Like, I don't think it's hard for a mother to imagine, how do you do that? Release your baby. And what is going on inside it? Is it anxiety and the worry? And is my baby going to be okay? Is he going to end up in the wrong hands? Will somebody save him? Will there be predators? Will he tip over? Right? Like, that just seems natural to me. There'd be 100 questions surrounding that exact act. And I did that with every single mom, all the 10 moms. So that helped me really bring them all to life and their emotions to life, because I, to some degree, I can't say I felt exactly what they felt, but the case I make in this book is motherhood is motherhood. No matter where or when you live, we all have emotions. Men, women, young, old, right? It's part of, again, the human experience. And so I believe they also had to learn how to manage those emotions. They were real people with, real struggles and with love in their hearts for their children and their families and the situations around them. So that changed. It really just changed my perspective on how I read the Bible, number one, but also just specifically when it comes to moms, is to say whatever that we are going through, the struggles, the challenges, the emotions, I believe there is a story in the Bible that can speak to that and that can help us validate it, normalize it, and just inspire our journey. We're not going to face likely the same things that those moms faced, are the matriarchs, of the Christian faith, but we're facing, right, our own troubling and distressing circumstances and problems. But these are universal. That's part of the theology. That's part of, right? It's just understanding. It's not just happening to me. And on some level, that just lifts it a little bit to know that, right? Like, whatever you and I are feeling in this moment, there are millions of moms also feeling it all over the world. This very moment.
I've never thought about that. Like, back in biblical times, like, did these women have the guilt we have? I can't imagine. Like, I think it changes, right? Like, there are different things that change some of the emotions, the pressures, social media, certainly, like some of these things that we compare ourselves differently. But the fact that we love the same, our children are our children, we care for them, we know they're God's children, but we're here to shepherd them. But to think for thousands of years, those emotions, they really are the same. And you're right, that does lift it in some way. And we're not that different from any other mom, even on the other side of the world, that's dealing with different pressures or hunger or any of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
What tips do you have for moms, no matter where they are? Because our emotions are emotions. First being, as you mentioned, aware of them, being able to identify them, being able to admit them and process them. And as you mentioned a minute ago, if there's a mom out there struggling, don't do it alone. like a support group, like what you did, number one. And because other people are going through it, you may as well step alongside them and help them while they can help you. But what other tips do you have to help someone who is struggling with their emotions, whatever that might be?
Yeah, again, you said it beautifully. And the mantra I use is name them. Well, it's know them, meaning our emotions, know them, name them, share them, don't shame them. Our emotions are like the most honest thing, I think, about us, because they don't lie. They're raw. So they deserve to be understood and talked about and embraced. One of the things that I talk to Christian moms about is really our one-on-one time with the Lord is not optional. I mean, it's optional, right? People can do what they want with their time, but in terms of really learning how to manage our emotions, is we need to be able to set aside time, really protect that time, carve it out with the Lord, and process our emotions with the truth of who He is. Capital T, truth. So one of the things I say is that it might be true that you feel X, Y, and Z, and we can so easily get stuck in our emotions and in that and wallow in it. And it just feels like this dark pit. When we are alone with our thoughts, we're in this sort of cyclical narrative, this one story narrative over and over, and that's where we stay stuck. And so we can set that aside, right? That those emotions are real. Those are true. But let's lift our eyes, lift our heart up to the Lord and invite His truth, capital T, and truth is a person, inviting Jesus in to our emotions to help us process and to help remind us of what else is true about our story, our circumstance, our life in general. So in essence, what faith helps us do is zoom out. So when we are always like in this close-up, like a close-up lens, I use this analogy because again, I come from acting and Hollywood and there's different types of cameras, right? There's that close-up camera that really gets in close to see the expression and the facial expressions of a person. And that's really what draws us in. It's that we get to see the emotion, right, on the actor's face when we're watching a movie, TV show. And then there's a medium lens, which is you're just taking a step back. You're just getting a little bit more characters in the scene. And then there's that long lens, which is from afar, which really captures the entire scene. And so when you're watching anything on TV or a movie, it's a combination of those cuts, the long shot, the medium shot, the close-up shot, and other things as well. And so I look at it similarly with our emotions is we're so caught up in the close-up shot that it's hard to see what else is true, what else is good that's happening, right? It's perspective. We need heaven's perspective on our situation. And so having that long zoom or zooming out, really getting some altitude and bringing in what else is true about my life, right? Like bringing in that gratitude of what I have and my health and my spouse, my family, right? We get caught up in the situational little circumstance, which is big. I don't want to dismiss it. That is real and it deserves our attention and our heart's invested in that. But there's a bigger story being told. And so that's really one big tip is to, with the Lord's help, to zoom out and get a bigger perspective. The other thing I tell moms too is when it comes to our mental health, our emotional journey in motherhood is to take a more holistic approach. And we're going to acknowledge our emotions for sure. But there are many parts to us that we can also be growing and tending to. One of the things I share is this acronym of PIES, PIESS, like how many slices of pies have you had today? And P is for physical, taking care of our physical self, taking a walk, moving around, dancing around our kitchen. I can't tell you how many times after a walk, I just feel so much better. I have clarity. I'm able to focus. And the thing I was worried about, maybe I just have a little more clarity. about. So the physical part, I is for intellect. God gave us a mind to take in to get to, information and new things to stimulate, grow our mind. So I think that's a very healthy part of our wellness. So the physical, our minds, E is for emotional health, right? Checking in with ourselves throughout the day. How am I doing? Am I okay? Am I okay? Just processing, just giving words to the feelings that we're having and processing that. So that's the E. S is our spiritual, right? There's a spiritual component to us. God made us, right? Physical, intellectual, emotional, but also we're spiritual beings. Have we spent time with Jesus? Have we spent quiet time renewing our minds, strengthening our hearts with His word? Not just my words that are in my head, kind of fluttering around, but truth from His word that's eternal. So that's, and then the second S is we're also social beings. We're relational beings. And so we are made for connection, to hug your child, talk to a friend, text a friend, right? We need those things. So I think just by, again, zooming out and just seeing there's other parts of us that we can be tending to alongside our emotions. And when we do that, we just grow more resilient. We grow stronger and healthier as a whole person, including our emotional
we
side.
might think, I can do this on my own. I'm good. Like, I am guilty of that. I am so guilty of that. As such a strong mom growing up, that I thought I can handle this, and I can in the temporary, but then I realized I wrote all that down, and I hope everyone hears that you still have to pay attention to your spiritual side, your physical side, like all of those things, and social, like how important that is. It's so easy, especially after the years that we spent inside during COVID, that were like, you just kind of, you turn inward and think you can handle it. But what a great acronym for remembering those things. Well, I'm going to put a link to your book. I'm excited for people to read it and excited for what you're doing. I'm curious though, I would ask about this because you're in LA, you're in Hollywood. It's what you're doing, especially on the spiritual side and the faith side, isn't as popular out there. Maybe in your world, but how do you balance that? As a journalist, I always struggled in balancing that. How do you balance that? And do you struggle with that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I am fortunate enough to be in women's ministry, and I get to speak into their lives and lead small groups, and I use my book in small groups. So I am very faith oriented. Many parts of my life, just actively in a faith-based community. And it is difficult. I think when I was in the acting industry, it was very difficult. I was younger in my faith, so I wasn't as bold, I would say, as vocal about my faith. But I always just felt just this responsibility to be a light and to just have a quiet confidence, right? Wherever I was, how I carried myself, how I related to people, the conversations I had. I was a lot more quiet. And now as I've just grown in age, grown in my faith and I see what God has called me to, there's a stronger sense of purpose really in life to be more vocal, come what may.
You listen, God, where do you want me? And if it means putting myself out there so that others can grow and learn, well, I applaud you for doing that. As I've gone through the same thing, and I know you're making a difference in people's lives, and God's using you. So thank you for your time, and I encourage everyone to check out the show notes to learn more about you and to get your book as well. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.